Just to target the subcontainer content, I believe. Just go back down. We'll copy this row, paste it in there, in between the backticks. Obviously, you know, if we click on the other rows, then it's gonna show the content of the previous. You could fill all this out on your own if you desire. This tutorial is a continuation of my Amazon navbar video, so if you haven't seen that, then I suggest that you go and watch that first to get an understanding of what I'm doing in this video. But what we are going to do in this tutorial is we are going to learn how to fetch results from a database and then display them when we click on one of these relevant options. So we just clicked on Prime Videos, and then it finds the categories grouped under Prime Videos from a MongoDB database, and then it displays them on the submenu. And now if we go back, we click on a different option such as Amazon Music. It does the same, only for Amazon Music instead of Prime Video. Therefore it displays different results instead. The results related to Amazon Music instead of Prime Video. Again, I'll show you for one more time. Apps for Android, again it shows different results now. So if this interests you, then keep watching and find out how to do this. To start off this tutorial, we are going to initialize Node Package Manager in our root folder for our Amazon navbar project. So we're going to open up a terminal in this root folder, and then we're going to say npm init, and then we're going to say we're going to use the Y flag to select yes for everything automatically. And then we're going to open up Visual Studio Code in our root project folder. So we do that by typing out code followed by space and then full stop. Obviously you can use the code editor of your choice. I use VS Code. Okay, once our text editor of choice is loaded up, we're going to create a new file called server.js. This will be where we contain the server-side NodeJS scripting. Now we're going to create a new folder, and we'll call it public. This will serve all of our static files. We'll copy all the files other than the server.js file that we just created and drag it into the public folder. Okay, and then we'll need to go back to our terminal, and then we'll say npm I, which is short for install, and we'll store the express dependency. The other dependency that we need to install is Mongoose, so we'll do the same for that, so npm I Mongoose. Whilst we wait for that to finish installing, we'll say const express equals require express, and then we'll say const mongoose equals require mongoose, and then we'll initialize that express app. So by say const app equals express as a method. Below that, we'll write a comment informing us of what the code below is going to do. So I'll say we can handle HTTP post requests containing JSON data. And the way that we do this is we say app.use express.json. Now, normally you would use body parsers to do this, but at the time of recording, body parser has actually been deprecated and it's been replaced by express.json. And just for good measure, we'll also say express.url encoded, and then we'll say extended true, and this will just be for normal HTTP requests. And then we'll need to tell Express where our static folder is, which is the public folder that we just created. So we'll say, write a comment saying what we're going to do. So create a static folder, host files, is the purpose of it. We'll say app.use express.static, call it public, which is obviously a folder name. Now obviously Mongoose should be installed by now, so let me just check. Yep, it's installed obviously. So below this we'll write a comment where we set up Mongoose. We'll say mongoose.connect mongodb //localhost the default port for Mongo database, which is 27017, and we'll call the database Amazon DB. And then at the time of recording this video, to avoid deprecation warnings, we'll need to put an object as the second argument. Inside we'll say use new URL parser, true, and use unified topology, also be true. This might be different in regards to when you're watching this video, but obviously you'll need to find out how to avoid the deprecation warnings on your own, unfortunately. Now we're going to create the schema. We'll call it Amazon schema equals new mongoose dot schema for capital S, that's important. We will overwrite its default ID field with a string, and it'll have one other field called content, and that will be an array. Below that we'll define the model, so we'll say Amazon navbar data with the model name, and we'll say mongoose.model. Item will be the collection name, which will be turned into items by Mongo database, and then obviously we'll specify the schema that we just created. Now we'll handle the GET request for the default route, so we'll say app.get / which is the default route, request object, response object. In the callback method, you will say res.send file __ dir name, and then we'll say /public /homepage.html. Now currently we don't have a HTML file called homepage.html, so to solve this we're going to rename our index.html to be homepage.html. The reason for this is if we use index.html, then our server will automatically host that file automatically, but we don't want to do that. We only want to render the HTML file when they make a GET request to this specific route. And then below this we'll set up the local server on port 3000 by saying app.listen 3000, and then we'll also say if we're using a remote server, process.env.port. Now to start the server we will, first of all we'll need to install NodeMon, so I'll post a link to where you can install that in the description, but we'll just say NodeMon, we'll start our server.js. Once that's started we can go to localhost, just the default route, and yeah, as you can see we should have our website loaded up with just the static content that we had before, so it's not using a database to render this content. So now we're going to actually add some documents to our database. So we need to start Mongo database. So we'll create a new terminal window, and then we'll say mongod to start the Mongo database, and then we will create a new collection. So below our model we will say const navbar data, something like that, doesn't really matter, equals new, base it off the model. It will be a document, its ID will be, we're going to create the data for this first prime video option, so its ID will be prime video. Its content will be as specified, it will be an array. Each item in the array will be an object in itself. It will have a field of title. Its title will be, if you go on the Amazon website, I'll show you. I probably don't need to post a link to this, obviously. So yeah, prime video, but some other options, they've got different titles. So this one's stream music, and they've also got another one, buy music. But because we're just doing the prime video for now, we'll just say title prime video. And then the options will be the second field, that will be an array, and it will contain all of these options below the title. So we'll just drag this to the side and then put this here, and then we'll write out all these real quick. So all videos included with prime, just trying to make it as fast as possible. Prime video Okay, now we can save this, so we'll say .save, at the end. Run this. Okay, now because we've got NodeMon already running, we should be saved in the database. So to view our Mongo database, we're going to say Mongo, very simply. And then we'll say use our database name, which is Amazon DB. So we'll say use Amazon DB. And then we'll say show collections. Items is a collection name, as I said before. So we'll say db.items.find. And as you can see, it's been saved in here, so we can delete it now. Okay, we're not going to delete it all, we'll just delete everything up to there. Because we're going to save one more document as well. We'll put the necessary syntax in, like that. And we're also going to stop our NodeMon server to stop any duplicates I'm saving. We do that by pressing Ctrl+C twice. We're also going to create the collection that will handle the Amazon Music option, because this one's got 2 titles. So the way that we're going to do this is content will be 2 objects instead of 1. Each object will represent the title and the options below the title. So the title of this will be, first of all, the ID will be Amazon Music, because that's what it says there. So Amazon Music will be the ID. Title will be Stream Music for this one. And that will also have the same field name, options. Amazon Music Unlimited. Amazon Music. Okay, now that we've filled out all the options below the stream music, we're going to create the new object, as I said before. And its title will be Buy Music, as you can see on the official Amazon website. And then its content will simply be 2 items, CDs and vinyl, and download store. And then we'll save this using the save method. And then to obviously save it, we need to run our server. So we say NodeMon server.js. So run it like that. Make sure that it's saved by going to our Mongo database again. And we'll say db same collection, which is items.find. Yep, it's been saved. Now I'm going to stop saving the documents now, because I don't want this tutorial just to be comprised of me saving documents. We're only going to create the data required for these first 2 options here, Prime Video and Amazon Music, just because it's a tutorial, we're not doing the full thing. So we'll maximize our VS Code now again, and we're going to exit out of this just because we don't need it open at the moment. Now we'll open our public folder. We'll go back to our HTML file, and we're going to delete this Prime Video because we don't need it anymore. And we're also going to delete this one as well. If you don't recognize those, then watch my previous video to see where they came from. And what we're going to do is this div here, the one that contains the Prime Video text, we're going to give it the ID of Prime Video. If you paid attention, you can see that this ID matches the ID that we saved in the document. And we'll also give this div here the same ID. The reason for this is because we want to retrieve the same results regardless of whether the user clicked on the row or the text itself. And now we'll do the similar sort of thing for the Amazon Music. We'll say its ID will be Amazon Music. Again, it matches the ID that was saved in the database. And we'll do the same here, Amazon Music. Now in our JavaScript file, we'll scroll down. We can delete these 2 event handlers now because they're not even used anymore. Okay, now we're going to comment out these 2 animations because we're not going to use them yet. And we're also going to change this to, we'll put a space, and we also want to apply this event listener to the child divs of the side nav row, because we also gave the ID on the child divs, so we also want it to have the same event listener. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually give the event listener an event argument. This is so we can get access to the ID of the element that we clicked on. So we'll say let id equals event.target.id, and then we'll say if id, so that if they clicked on a row with an id value, we'll say fetch / find data. This will be the route that we will shortly create on our server, which will return the necessary data that we need. And then second argument will be an object. We'll say method post, because that's what we're doing. Its body will be, it will send JSON data, so we'll say json.stringify. The field name will be this ID, because we are sending over the ID. And we'll say headers just for good measure. We'll say content type application /JSON. Okay, now we need to go back to our server and actually handle this post request. So go back to our server. What did we call the route? We called it /find data, so we'll just copy this to make sure that we get it right. Go down app.post. Whoops. Make sure it's in a string, obviously. Create the callback method for that now. And then we're going to write out the Amazon navbar data object, and then we'll say find by ID, and we'll say underscore ID, obviously, rec.body.this.id. So it will find the document that has the matching ID as the ID of the element that we clicked on. This is the reason why it was very important that we ensured that they both shared the same IDs, because this is how we're going to locate its corresponding document. And the second argument will be a callback function with the error object, and we'll say result, which will contain the returned document. Open the method, and then we'll say if, so if there's no error, and result, so if there has been a document that matches the ID. Open that up, but first of all we'll say else because it's more simple. We'll say console.log error, because it's either an error or we haven't found a document with matching IDs. But inside the if block we'll say res.send navbar data will be the field name. The value will be result.content. This will return the content field array of the returned document, so all the content that we put in here basically in this array. So now we need to handle this data that's been sent back from our server, so we go to our script.js file, and on this fetch method we'll use then. So this will trigger a callback function when the promise has gotten a value back from the fetch method. We'll say response, and then this will return as indicated by the arrow character, where we say response.json. So this will decode the response from JSON object into a JavaScript object, and then on that we'll create another then method. So activate the callback of this when the response is finished decoding into a JavaScript object. We'll say response data will be the name of the newly decoded JavaScript object, and then we'll say let navbar data equals response data dot navbar data because remember that was the field of the JSON object which contained the content field of the matching document. Below that we'll create an empty string using backticks just for consistency. We'll call it let return content. So it won't be called let, sorry. That's the variable. And then below that we'll create a boolean called first iter, and we'll set it to be true because when it's instantiated it will be before the first iteration. What we're going to do now is we're going to loop through the navbar data array, because remember that was the value type of the content field of the document. So we'll say navbar data dot for each result arrow function, and then we'll create a comment to say what we're going to do. So we'll say if not first iteration, comma, then append horizontal rule to make title stand out full stop. And then below this, we'll create an if statement. If first iter is false, then it's obviously not the first iteration, and we will make this just below the if block. We'll say first iter, just so we can make things clear, false. So now, as you can see, as soon as the first iteration, even before it's finished executing, this first iter will be false. So that's how we know that it's not the first iteration. We'll say return content, and then we will append this text. We'll append a horizontal wall. This is how we can get the horizontal wall to appear below all the content of the first header. So below the boolean, we will say create a new comment called append title, and we will say return content plus equal, and what we will do here is we'll go back to our HTML document, scroll down to our sub-navigation menu, which we actually commented out here. Again, if this is unfamiliar to you, then you need to watch my previous video. We'll just copy the divider where we declare our header of the sub-navigation menu. What we'll do, we'll change this using string interpolation. This is why we use backticks, just to make things really easy. And the content of the divider will be result.title. So below this, we will create a new comment, just to so we can make everything really clear. We will say loop through content, and then we will say result.options. This will loop through the options array. For each option, we will append a new string to return content like we've done before, but this will be related to a row rather than the header. So I'll copy that from here with the A tag as well. Again, if this was a real application, you would probably have a field which contains all the values for the link. Obviously, you know, these are just dummy links, so we don't have that. And then we'll change the content of the divider using string interpolation, and that will be simply option. So option will be the individual options as strings. Now outside of all the loops, but still inside this then callback, we will create a new comment where we actually change the HTML of the subcontainer content ID div. So we'll say change HTML to correct content, and then we'll say document.get element by ID. Target that one. Subcontainer content.inner HTML. We'll set that to equal return content, which should now be a string that contains all of our elements rendered out correctly. And then below that, we can copy these commented out lines and then just uncomment them, because we want the animation to be triggered so they can appear on the screen. Okay, now that we've done all this, let's make sure everything's good. It should be good as far as I'm aware. We will start up our server again. Hopefully everything will work out. So we'll see nodemon server.js. Start up our server. Again, go off the Amazon website, go onto our own, refresh. And then we'll say Prime Video. Okay, I have made a mistake here, so obviously it's not working. The problem, I made a mistake in the selector. I didn't use a comma, which is what I should have done, which basically says if I select the side nav row, or if I select the child div of the side nav row. Now, the comma is a multiple combined selector. If we omit the comma, then it turns into a hierarchical selector, which is something completely different. So there's the reason for that. Now, if we refresh our page, restart our server, even though nodemon restarts automatically, we click on Prime Video. Yeah, as you can see, it's working now. And then Amazon Music, it should change. Yep, as you can see, it's changed. This is good. This is what we want. But obviously, it's not going to work for the other ones. It's not even going to play an animation because we had this if statement. And none of these other rows have ID attributes on them, which is the reason why they don't work. Obviously these work because it's not the row. But yeah, I mean, I've given you the basic tools that you need to know to figure out how to do this. And I hope this helped. If you have any comments or queries, then don't hesitate to post them down in the comments box below. I'll be obliged to answer all of them that I can to the best of my ability. And also, if you enjoyed this video, if you benefited from the tutorial, then please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. You would do me a huge favour, especially considering I put all this effort into making these tutorials of, in my opinion, I think they're, well, serviceable standard. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you, and peace out.